Now when our first HDR image appears on screen, it looks awful, but this is quite normal. At this stage we can save the file. If we go to File Save at the top of the screen here, we can save this and we can run this through the tone mapping part of Photomatix more than once. It's a bit like saving a second RAW file, so to speak. So I think I'll do that. I'll just save it using the default name, and you can see what it does here. It takes the file name of the image and then just adds the 4 and the 5. So I've used image 0983, it's given me a -4, -5, so I can even tell which images I've used to make these three into a HDR. So I'm going to save that. Once we've actually saved it, that gives us the opportunity to come back and rework it later, but the next stage is to click to tone map it. Now it only does take a few seconds to generate the image in the tone mapping section, and straight away we see a tremendous difference. If I move on to the image, you can see a large square appears. I can click onto the picture and you can see what happens. We get like a loop view, so we can see the detail of the image. But let's turn that off for the time being and look over here at the options we have. We've got two ways to tone map this image. We can use the details enhancer or the tone compressor. Now I've made a number of tests, or I've carried out a number of HDR images, and what I've found is that the details enhancer seems to work for me 9 times out of 10, and the tone compressor doesn't seem to have quite the control that the details enhancer does. So I'm going to stick here with the details enhancer, but we can take a quick look at what we have with the tone compressor. You can see we've got brightness, tonal range compression, contrast adaptation, white point, black point, temperature and saturation. In the details enhancer we've got quite a bit more. Now I'm a great believer in looking at an image, deciding what I think it needs, and then going to the tool to actually make that change. The first thing I think is that it is a little bit on the cool side, so I'm going to take a look in the color tab here at the temperature. I'm going to move the temperature from the 0 setting. We'll move it up to 3, and it takes a few seconds to refresh the image, and I don't know whether you're able to see that on the small video, but it's certainly warmed up the image. If I take it back to 0 again and we look at the image as we do that, you can see it's getting quite cool again. So let's try going a bit further. Let's go to 5 and really change that, and you can see now there's quite a difference in the warmth of the image, and perhaps 5 is a little bit too far, and 4 doesn't look too bad at all, so I think I'll stick with 4. I'm not going to change the saturation of the highlights or the saturation of the shadows. We've got lots of fine tuning sliders here, and we could spend all day looking at what all of them do. The main ones we're looking for is in the tone tab here. We've got a white point and a black point. If I move the black point to the right and look at the image as I go, you can see it does what we would expect. It darkens the image, or it darkens the shadow areas. If I bring it back, we can lighten those shadow areas a little bit, and we're all going to choose something different here. So we've got quite a few changes we can make: white point, black point and gamma. Now in all of the HDR images that I've created, I've found the gamma to be quite useful. Just make a mental note of what the setting is here, 088, and we can move it to the right just so you can see the effect. And you can see I've lightened the entire image quite a lot. So we do have the opportunity, of course, of going the other way if we want to give a little bit more power into our image, but need to be careful we don't virtually undo what we've achieved by making the HDR in the first place. So I'm just going to tweak it up a little bit, and that's looking pretty good. I'm looking up now at an area which says light smoothing. I'll click, the dot is selected on the far right. You may not be able to see that in the small video, and it's labelled very high. If I take it right down to the other extreme end, you can see a weird effect appears on our image. Now generally speaking, the software seems to pick one of these light smoothing icons here, and to be honest, I found it gets it right 9 times out of 10, probably greater than that actually, and it's certainly done that here. So it's okay to try these others and see what effect it has on the image, but I found in practice that generally speaking the software does a great job. Luminosity, I've not found a great need to change this, I have to say. It's set to number 7 at the moment. If I drag it down to 0, look at the image and you can see how it affects the image. It's almost like a contrast really. And I think it's quite okay as it is. Now we are going to need to gain some experience of using the sliders in the Details Enhancer, but the beauty of them, like most of the sliders we use in our software, we can see in the thumbnail to the right exactly what we're getting, so it's not a great problem, and the only way we really learn what the sliders do is to try them, so we cannot actually get around the need for a little bit of experience. But once we've got the image to as good as we can get using Details Enhancer, we need to process the image. I need to scroll down to see the button to do that down the bottom of the screen here. Now when we hit the process button, we've got another process that's going to take 2 to 3 minutes, but it's going to depend on the speed and power of your computer and of course the resolution of the files you used from your camera. So be patient, click process and allow Photomatix to do its work. And of course while you're waiting for the tone mapping to do its work, and sometimes we get a little bit frustrated looking at the little bar creeping across the screen, but think of all the layers and layer masks you're avoiding using by working in Photomatix with HDR. Now to generate the image you can see on screen, my computer took 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes absolute maximum. And I'm not using a powerful computer. It's an AMD Athlon 2400 Plus chip, 2.01 GHz, and it's got 1.5 gig of RAM. But the computer is about 7 years old, so the other components are certainly not state of the art, yet it still produced the goods from a camera that starts off with 21 million pixels in each frame. Now I can save this file now, so I'm going to go to File, Save As. I'm going to save it in the location we're working, and I will give this another name. I'll just call it HDR Final, and you can see I'm saving it as a 16-bit TIFF. So I'm going to click Save. Once it's saved, I'm going to close down the image and Photomatix, and we're going to go into the Adobe Bridge. Now I've made my thumbnails just a little bit smaller, but this isn't a bad way of looking at these. Perhaps it's going to be a little bit small for yourselves to view, but remember the 3 images we started with, the one on the top right, bottom left and the one in the middle, and when we compare them to what we can see in the HDR image, there's a massive improvement for the better. This image here, which we're not being shown a thumbnail of, is the basic HDR that was generated through Photomatix. It's this we can open up again through Photomatix and put that through the tone mapper once more. And that's not a bad thing to do, because each time we work through an image we're gaining experience in the tone mapping section. But what I'm going to do now is open this image in Photoshop. And what I like to do, although there's not a great deal to do with this image, I like to open the image through Adobe Camera Raw. Now to do that I need to come into Photoshop. I'm going to go to File and I'm going to choose Open As. I'm then going to navigate to where I've stored the image. So I need to navigate to my D drive, ePhotozine, and I'm looking for HDR Final. But down here where we've got the option that says Open As, if we use the drop down box, and I hope this doesn't drop down off the screen, no, it's going up, that's good, then I'm going to select Camera Raw, and when I click Open, the image will open up in Adobe Camera Raw.